Hi there, and thank you for joining me today. My name is Jessica, and I work at K&A Greenhouse in Madison. I am going to do a presentation today about the new woody plants that we have coming in this year. Don't have any new vines, but I do have some shrubs, a couple of roses. I have one fruit, and a bunch of new trees, trying to get more into the columnar varieties because a lot of the lot sizes are so small. That it's easier if we plant a columnar tree versus trying to plant a huge like oak 60-foot span into a city lot. So want to apologize in advance if my voice gets a little wonky. I'm getting over a spring cold, so bear with me. But without further ado, let's get going. Okay, so first we will go over the new shrubs for 2024 season. The first one I have here is a smoke bush called the Velvet Fog. This one is a Proven Winners brand. It is supposed to be more floriferous than some of the older varieties like Royal Purple that we have carried, and I will have Royal Purple coming in again this year, just not quite as many. The Velvet Fog is going to max out right around 6 to 8 feet tall and 5 or 6 feet wide, so it's not something that you can keep smaller. If you are looking for a more of a dwarf, we do have other varieties like Velvetini. That is the shortest one that we carry coming to us from our Canadian supplier. I also have Winecraft Black, which is, we're finding out, to be a little bit taller than it was originally supposed to get. They originally said it was going to be 3 to 4 feet tall and are now finding it to be closer to 5 or 6 feet tall. So this one is just slightly taller than the Winecraft Black, but not really a true dwarf version like the Velvetini will be. But as I said, it's supposed to be more floriferous, so you can see here from the photos, it is going to have more of those smoky plumes in summer. Generally speaking, they tend to flower midsummer, so you won't see much other than the purple foliage in the spring from this, but it does put on quite a show in the summer months. This one also is hardy to zone 4, so we should be good here in southern Wisconsin and even up into central Wisconsin as well if you have a northern cabin that you like to put plants at. Or I have a couple of customers that come down from the Stevens Point and Wausau area too as well. So we should be definitely hardy enough for either of those locations. Okay, so the second new shrub we have coming in this year is a Hydrangea macrophylla called Eclipse. It is coming to us from Bailey Nurseries, the first edition's brand. And as you can see from the photos, the foliage on this particular macrophylla has a dark purple color to it. The flowers will change color depending on your soil pH, but the flowers here that you see in the photos is what we will probably see here in the Madison area where we have our heavy clay soils. So it'll be more of like a hot pink color. If you have more of the sandy soils, it will be more of a purple color. But either way, just a very pretty flower. The plant itself is supposed to get 3 to 5 feet tall and the same width. In Wisconsin, southern Wisconsin, I would say it probably would be closer to 3 to 4 feet and not quite the 5 foot, just based on how short our growing season is. And this is another one too where you need to prune it in fall instead of in the winter or spring because the buds get set right after they're finished flowering. So make sure that you go ahead and prune these right after they're done flowering for you. Otherwise, you'll end up having the flower show up a little bit later in the season, more like late summer or early fall versus earlier, like in late June or July. This one is a zone 5, so it will need some protection if we get a nasty winter or if we get, polar vortex like we sometimes do. It's not a bad idea to try to protect the macrophyllas anyway, to try to protect those buds on them a little bit better. Best location for this is probably the east side of the house. That'll give it a little bit more of that protection from the winter winds, and it also gives it the part sun that it prefers. Morning sun is always better for Hydrangea macrophylla. That way they don't get crispy on the edges. Sometimes if hydrangeas get too much afternoon sun, it's too hot for them. and then you'll see them starting to brown out on the edges of the leaves. But east side is great. If you have a northern exposure in the summer, it gives it a couple of hours of sun in the morning, and if your house is like mine, it'll get a couple of hours at the tail end of the day as well. So that is our new hydrangea coming from Bailey's. Another new hydrangea macrophylla, actually coming to us from our Canadian suppliers, is called Let's Dance Skyview. We were given a few of sample shrubs last year, and we have one planted at each of our stores. And I have one planted down in my walnut garden that I call it. It's in the ring of 8 black walnut trees just to see if it's walnut tolerant. And another one of my workers planted it at her house. She has a very shady area because it's full of mature oak trees. So we're kind of experimenting yet because they were just planted last year, but the hydrangea planted at both of our stores does have buds already forming on it. So that's good news. We'll see what happens with the flowers. You know, time will tell if it starts to flower in June, or if it, you know, doesn't flower until later in the season, like we sometimes see with macrophyllus here in Wisconsin. This is another one that the flower color depends on your soil pH. So here on my property, it'll probably be pink, just because they have the heavy clay soils. You can alter your soil pH. We have products that we sell at both stores that you can definitely add to your soil to alter it if you would prefer to have that blue flower color instead. And Let's Dance Skyview is going to mature around 3 to 4 feet tall, about the same width. And again, you're going to have to prune it right after it's done flowering in order to get that earlier flush of flowers. I myself did not actually prune it last year at all. The first couple years I tend to not prune my macrophyllas, just to give it a good chance to get established, get the root system going, and get a little bit taller. I believe the height on it last year, if I'm remembering right, was about 8 to 10 inches tall. So it was a pretty small plant yet. Didn't want to prune too much off right away. A new panicle hydrangea we're getting this year is Pinky Winky Prime. So for a number of years, I mean, I remember when I was in my late 20s, we had Pinky Winky show up on the market for a panicle hydrangea. Now about 20 years later, we have Pinky Winky Prime that's coming up from Proven Winners. So this one is definitely not a small plant. This one would be great if you need to put a hedge in and you would like a flowering hedge. It'll get 6 to even up to 9 feet tall, and about the same width as well. So if you want a smaller panicle hydrangea, I would go for some of the smaller varieties like Little Hottie. Bobo's a short one. There's Little Quickfire, Little Lime Punch. There's a lot of different panicle hydrangeas. Pinky Winky Prime is definitely not one of them. So keep that in mind if you are interested in this particular plant. As you can see here, the flowers start out white and then they fade to pink with age, and then after they're completely done flowering, they'll turn brown. The Pinky Winky Prime tends to flower kind of midsummer, usually start in July, and the flowers tend to last about 3 to 4 weeks on most of the panicle hydrangeas before they turn brown. These also prefer full sun. They will tolerate part sun, so anything over 4 hours of sun a day is perfectly fine for this one. You can put it on that west side. It's a very hardy plant. It's going to be hardy to zone 3, so pretty much everywhere in Wisconsin will be perfectly fine for this panicle hydrangea. Okay, so this new shrub is a new 9-bark. Mahogany Magic was actually found by the sales rep I have through our Canadian supplier. So we are going to give this one a try as a substitute for Diablo that has been on the market for a long time. So like Diablo, Mahogany Magic is a taller, kind of skinnier plant. It tends to be 6 to 8 feet tall. It gets up to 10 feet tall if it's really happy where it's planted. Generally it's 5 or 6 feet wide. 9-barks are also a nice plant if you are looking for a hedge, and like this one, 6 to 8, 9, 10 feet tall will definitely form a nice barrier between you and whatever you don't want to look at. It'll have the purple foliage all season. Usually in fall, 9-bark tend to get more of an orange hue as long as they get enough sun during the summer months. They flower with these white flower heads in June, and then you can see the seed heads there, the red seed heads will appear shortly after that. So as I said, full sun is best for the leaf coloration. If you put the purple foliaged 9-barks in more of a shadier spot, they tend to be more of an olive green color. So you definitely need more of a full sun spot in order to keep that the purple color. This one also will be drought tolerant once it gets established. So as with every tree and shrub, the first 3 years, usually you have to make sure it gets enough water just to get the root system established. But I have a couple of 9-barks on my property, and after the first 3-4 years, I only have to water them when we have a really droughty, dry spell in the summer. So this is another one if you have a hot, dry area, that'll make a nice hedge, like I said, and generally speaking, the rabbits and deer leave them alone as well. Okay, our first new rose this year is a climbing rose called Fruity Petals. This one has kind of an orangey pink bud that opens to a brighter kind of salmon color, peach colored flower with pink. And then as it ages, it tends to fade a little bit in color. This one will grow up to be about 6 to 6.5 feet tall at maturity. So you can plant it as a climbing rose. You can see from the photo here, you can put it on a trellis, you can put it on an arbor. Just make sure that you attach it to those because it will not grow up and attach by itself. So you'll need to tie it to either of those structures. This one, if it is deadheaded, will continue to flower all summer long. You just have to make sure to keep it deadheaded. Otherwise it'll get the rose hips and while that's nice for some of the birds that like the rose hips, it will keep it from continuing to flower. Full sun because it's a rose. South and west side of the house is great. This one is hardy to zone 4, which is kind of unusual for climbing roses. Generally speaking, there's a lot of really pretty climbing roses out on the market, but they tend to be hardy to zone 6. We have a few that we are offering that are hardy to zone 5. But this one is nice hardy to zone 4, so it'll be hardy for most of Wisconsin residents here. This one, typically roses need a little bit more care and watering. This one has high disease resistance, so shouldn't be as much of an issue as with like heirloom roses, the hybrid tea roses that need a little bit more with insect and disease care. But in order to keep it less stressed, you're going to have to make sure that it gets adequate water, especially if we get those dry spells again in the summer. And this is our second new rose of the 2024 season. It's technically labeled as a climbing rose, but it only grows 3 to 5 feet tall and about the same width. So you could grow it as a taller, almost a shrub rose. And this one is hardy to zone 5. So again, you're probably going to need to give it a little bit of protection, especially those first few years. The flower buds are this nice peach apricot color, and then as the blooms fade, they turn more of a pink. So they will fade to a little bit lighter color as they age. This one does have continuous bloom as long as you continue to deadhead it, like some of the shrub roses. So you'll start it in June, and then you'll get continuous reblooming in July and August as well. Full sun, of course, because it's a rose, full sun is always best for roses. And you are going to need to make sure that this one gets adequate water, especially the first 3 years, but even after that, just to make sure it doesn't have the cane dieback. But as I said, it's a versatile plant because you can put it up against a trellis or an arbor and have it climb up to 5 feet on either of those structures, or you can just plant it as kind of a standalone 5-foot shrub and just let it be kind of a backdrop in your garden for other plants. All right, here is one of our new evergreens for this year. This is a white spruce, but it has blue needles. So I'm hoping that that means that it's a little bit more tolerant of our clay soils than the Colorado blue spruce are. This one is also considered to be a shorter, I don't know if dwarf is the right word, but it's a shorter evergreen. This one is going to be after about 10 years in the garden, 6 to up to 12 feet tall, just depending on, your soil type and how well it's cared for and how droughty it is. But this one is not going to be like a 60-foot tall evergreen. So it's nice to have in a city lot just because it is a little bit shorter and easier to fit in smaller spaces. It does have this traditional Christmas tree shape that a lot of people are looking for, so it will grow this way without a ton of pruning. And because it is a white spruce, it handles dry conditions after, first 3 years, as I keep saying. It also handles moderate water. Absolutely do not put something like this in a wet spot. Generally speaking, evergreens don't tend to grow well if they have wet feet for a very long time. So this one, clay soil tolerant, sandy soil of course is great. All white spruce tend to like the lighter sandy soils. Best light for this is going to be full sun, but it will tolerate partial shade. Doesn't do very well in full shade, so I would avoid that. But anything over, 4 hours of sun every day should be perfectly fine for this little guy. All right, we have another one coming to us from Isley Nursery in Oregon State. This one is a Colorado blue spruce. This one is, the variety name is called Monty. If you're familiar with either the Hoopsie or the Montgomery blue spruce, those are the parents of this particular variety. So you can see here it also has that traditional Christmas tree shape, a little bit more broad than the previous slide, but this one will get to be about 8 feet tall and about 6 feet wide at maturity. Has the traditional blue-gray needles year-round. It's not as tolerant to clay soils as the previous white spruce would be, but because it is a dwarf, it is a little more tolerant to tougher locations. They don't tend to live quite as long as the regular Colorado blue spruce, so you can expect usually about 15 years or so of growth before it starts to decline. So just keep that in mind when planting a shorter dwarf evergreen in your landscape. Colorado blue spruce, Monty prefers full sun. Again, will tolerate partial shade, but not as well as the white spruce will. So full sun is best if you want to put this one in your landscape. Would make a nice hedge still, just not, as I said, not as tall as a traditional Colorado blue spruce. Very hardy though. It is hardy to zone 2, so definitely hardy for everyone living here in Wisconsin, which is always a plus. The first arborvitae that we're getting in, new arborvitae that we're getting in this year, is called Golden Blush. It's kind of a yellow version of the emerald green, if you're familiar with that one. The Golden Blush will be about 15 feet tall at maturity. It's more narrow though, so as you can tell, this particular photo shows it as a very young plant. So 15 feet tall, about 6 feet wide or so it's not quite as narrow as the emerald green, but it is still a lot more narrow than the height. It's hardy to zone 4, which is nice for our winters. You just never know what they're going to do. This one, because it has the yellow needles, will need full sun. If you put it in too much shade, it will end up getting, more of a lime green or even just a regular green needle cast to it instead of this yellow color. Also, generally speaking, these make wonderful hedges. Most arbs are pretty much what people will plant whenever they're looking for a hedge to put in. So this is definitely another option for you if you want more of a color splash versus just a green hedge. And this one is also resistant to winter burn. So I'm assuming that probably comes from it being more of a zone 4 than a zone 5, like some of the arbs are that we see in the nursery yard. But either way, regardless, it is going to be hardy for Madison area. Has that nice yellow color, tall and skinny habit. So it makes it pretty desirable for a lot of people down here in the Madison area. Another arb that we're getting in that's new this year is called Northern Spire. It is coming to us from our Canadian suppliers. Hardy to zone 4, so it's a little bit hardier than the emerald green that we sell a ton of every year. Northern Spire is going to be about 15 to 20 feet tall and closer to about 5 feet, 4 to 5 feet wide. So as you can see from the photo here, it is a tall and skinny plant again, just with a little bit hardier rating than what the emerald green arborvitae will have. The green foliage is going to be year-round, a little bit more resistant to the winter burn that we sometimes see, but again makes a great hedge, and just the usual average needs for water, full sun to part sun, and like I said, hardy to zone 4, so pretty much everyone in the southern half of Wisconsin will be just fine to plant this new variety if you're looking for something new. Okay, so I went a little crazy with trees, bear with me. This is the first of the new tree varieties that I have coming in this year. It is a Norway maple called Crimson Sentry. This particular variety is more of the columnar type, you can see from the photo. It does have the purple foliage for the entire season. It just has more of an upright. So it's a 25 foot tall and a 10 to 15 feet wide at maturity. So you can fit them on, on the city lots a lot easier. You can also put them, as you see in the photo here, like along sports fields or parking lots a little bit easier, so you don't have to worry about the horizontal branching getting in the way, if you're trying to mow, something like that. This one is hardy to zone 4B, so we should be definitely okay here in southern Wisconsin with this one. Coming to us from J. Frank Schmidt out in Oregon State. So they have a lot of really cool trees. And like I said, I went a little nuts when I did some tree ordering this year. So hopefully this one strikes your fancy and we can get that in your landscape for you. Okay, so we have another columnar maple. This one is a red maple called Armstrong Gold. It is an improvement on its parent plant. So the growth habit on it is not going to be as leggy. It's going to be a little more compact than Armstrong. So in the spring and summer, it will have the green foliage. In the fall is when you kind of see that gold come into play. In the left-hand photo, you'll see the Armstrong Gold is the one that's more of that yellow-orange color, not the red behind it. So this one will have more of an orange fall color than the traditional red of a red maple. This plant is hardy to zone 4, so totally good for us here in Wisconsin. And the height is going to be 35 to 40 feet tall. The mature width is only going to be about 12 feet tall. So again, this one's really nice for city lots, for street planting, if you have an area by a parking lot, something like that. So it fits into more of a narrow spot a little bit better. And another new red maple here is called Brandy Wine. Just so you know, this is not a new variety on the market at all. It's just a new variety that we have not had in the past. So Brandy Wine has been around for a while. And the photo, I need to make sure that you understand this is the fall color. This is not what it's going to look like in spring and summer. So it is more of that kind of pyramid shape canopy. It has green leaves in spring and summer. And then in the fall, it changes to this really nice deep red for fall color. Which usually with most maples tends to last about a month, sometimes more depending on what our fall weather is like. This maple is hardy to zone 4. The mature height on it is right around 40 feet, but it is going to have about a 25 to 30 foot spread on it, so definitely not as skinny as the Armstrong Gold. But it's a nice shade tree, what a lot of people think of when they think of like a traditional maple tree that you see in the forest here in Wisconsin or even in, Vermont, New Hampshire area. So if you wanted more of a red maple that was columnar, but you wanted the red fall color, this variety is the one that you are probably going to want to purchase. It has the green leaves in spring and summer, but then in the fall it gets the traditional red fall color instead of that more of an orange like the Armstrong Gold gets. Same height, it's going to be 40 feet tall, but because it's columnar, it's going to be about 15 feet wide at maturity, so definitely a lot skinnier than Brandy Wine. About the same width as the Armstrong Gold. It just has that red fall color instead of the kind of more orange or yellow fall color that the Armstrong Gold gets. And one more columnar red maple. This one is called Red Rocket. This particular variety is going to be slightly shorter. It's listed as up to 38 feet tall at maturity than some of the other red maples that are up to 40. The spring and summer leaf color is still going to be green. The fall color is kind of a mix of orange and red, not just only red or only orange. So this one kind of, you can see from the photo there, has a little bit mix of both of the colors. This one is also a little bit hardier. So this is listed as hardy to zone 3. So that would, I believe, encompass all of the state of Wisconsin. I'm pretty sure that we're up to zone 3 now. So this one's just a little bit hardier. If you're worried about the zone 4 hardiness, may or may not be hardy enough for you. This one's just a little bit more cold hardy. It does grow a little bit slower than the other ones, which may result in more of a tighter crown than some of the other columnar red maples as well. So kind of a trade-off. I have a lot of different columnar varieties, so hopefully one of them will be good for you in your landscape. I have a new to us sugar maple called Green Mountain. It's actually been on the market for a very long time. I just have not gotten it in. Have instead decided to get stuff like Flashfire and the native sugar maple in. So this year, because I've had so many people ask me for this Green Mountain variety in the last few years, I've decided to get this one in too. It's hardy to zone 3, so again, hardy for most of Wisconsin, if not all of Wisconsin. It has reliable orange-red to sometimes even just all red fall color, which is a little bit unusual for sugar maples. They tend to be that very bright orange color that you generally see. This one seems to be more tolerant of soil types. And also it's listed as being resistant to Japanese beetles, which is kind of a big deal, especially if you're like our Mineral Point Road location, where we are surrounded by golf course and farm fields, which means it's fantastic for Japanese beetle grubs to grow, and then the adults love to feed on our trees. So hopefully we'll see the resistance this summer with this particular variety. Sugar maples do tend to be a larger plant, so make sure you give it enough space. The mature height on this one is listed as about 50 feet, and then it'll spread about 40 feet. So definitely not a columnar variety, but it is a very beautiful tree, and it seems like it will be very hardy for all of our clay soil and Japanese beetle issues that we have down here in the Madison area. All right, so we have this new birch. It's a variety of the Himalayan birch, so it has that very bright white bark on it. That you can see here, the foliage is very cut leaf, very fine and delicate, and it does have kind of a meandering weeping form is the best way I can describe it. It's a shorter plant, so it'll max out around 5 or 6 feet, and it generally spreads about 4 feet wide. So this is definitely a nice accent plant. Not going to be a shade tree by any stretch. So this one is hardy to, they're saying zone 4 on some places and zone 5 on others, but either way, if it's a zone 5, it should still be okay here in Wisconsin. And then you get that really nice white bark in the winter, even after the leaves fall off. The fall color on this one is also that golden yellow that birch trees get, so that's another plus. And full sun is best. The first few years, especially with birch, is very important to make sure that it gets enough water. Birch trees tend to dry out really fast, so you have to make sure that you keep them well watered the first few years until their root system gets well established. All right, so I was able to a few years ago get in the American chestnut, and I can't find it from my suppliers. So I thought I would try the Chinese chestnut this year. This particular tree is a very large tree. It will get 40 to up to 60 feet tall and wide, so you have to give it a lot of space. The growing habit, though, is very slow, so it's not going to put on a lot of growth. Best guess from me is probably closer to like 4 to 6 inches, maybe 8 inches a year, but it's not going to be like the hybrid maples that put on a couple of feet of growth. So it'll take a little bit for this one to fill in. The chestnuts are edible by wildlife and by humans, so if you're looking for chestnuts to roast for like Christmas or something like that, You could plant this. It's recommended to plant 2 of them for better pollination between the 2 trees versus the one trying to pollinate itself. So you're probably going to need a lot of space in order to get the chestnuts, just because each tree is going to be 40 to 60 feet wide. But if you have the space, it looks like it's a very pretty tree. You have the kind of fuzzy outer edge of the chestnuts, and they will mature in usually late summer or early fall for picking. So this particular plant, like I said, it's new. I'm kind of getting it in as a substitute for the American chestnut. Not quite the same, but we'll see what it does for us. All right, so I decided to get in another red bud. Kind of partially because they do well under black walnut trees, and we have so many customers, including myself, that have walnut trees. Red buds do grow well around all of my black walnut trees. So I personally will be buying one of these just because I obviously need another plant in my landscape. However, Golden Falls is going to be very similar to Ruby Falls in its growing habit with the weeping branches. You can see in the right-hand photo, it has the kind of lavender pink flowers that bloom before the leaves come out, and then the leaves will be the kind of lime green yellow color. It's listed as being full sun to part shade. I would probably err on the side of part shade, just because whenever I've seen yellow leafed red buds in full sun, they tend to sometimes get, the burn around the edges of the leaves if they don't get enough water. So again, you can use your discretion. Anything over 4 hours of sun is probably perfectly fine for these, and it will have that weeping branching habit. The mature height on this is listed as 8 feet. I don't know if it will actually get that tall here in Wisconsin, with our shorter growing seasons. So we may be closer to about 6 feet. The width on it is going to be about 3 to 4 feet wide. So again, it's going to be an accent plant, kind of like the birch that I was just talking about. But I think that it'll be a really pretty tree. This particular shrub is one of the ones that I am pretty excited about. I remember being able to sell it in my first and second jobs right out of college at different garden centers, but then I haven't been able to find it from my suppliers now that I'm working at K&A. Until this year, all of a sudden it appeared on an availability from one of our suppliers, and I snatched up as many as I could get before they were out. So this particular dogwood, you have to give it a lot of space. It will get 12 to 15 feet tall and 12 to 15 feet wide. Full sun to part shade is best for this one. You can see here it flowers yellow, just like a forsythia does. It flowers yellow before the leaves come out. And then, unlike the forsythia, it will also get berries that the birds will feed on. So it's kind of it's nice because it gets the spring, and then you'll also have kind of a late summer interest with the berries if if you see them before the birds eat them all off. And then again in the fall, you'll get kind of the red burgundy fall color that most dogwoods also get. This one is also hardy to zone 4, 4 to 8. So hardy here in Wisconsin. So hopefully it sells well, and a lot of other people are excited about it, just like I am. And we're back on columnar trees now. I decided to get in Adirondack, which is a columnar crabapple tree. So the Adirondack also is known for being very floriferous, like one of the most flower-heavy crabapple trees on the market right now. So you'll get the light pink buds that will open to the white flowers that you see in the photo on the left-hand side there. Columnar growing habit, it's going to be 15 to 18 feet tall and about 10 to 12 feet wide. So you can see here it does have more of that upright, compact columnar growing habit. It will also get red berries, and then the yellow fall color that is pretty common with crabapple trees as well. Full sun is best for crabs. You don't want to put it in too much shade. You won't get as many flowers, so that's kind of a bummer. But a lot of people can put crabapple trees, especially this one, on the corner of their homes, like on the foundation plantings. And this one is nice and narrow, so that you can definitely put this one close to your house without worrying about it growing into your siding or windows or anything like that. Hardy to zone 4, so again, it's hardy here for most of us here in Wisconsin. The Prunus pink flare is not actually an edible cherry tree. This is an ornamental cherry tree. So this is one of the many different varieties of Sargent cherries that you see on the market. However, this one is hardy to zone 3B, which is kind of unusual with ornamental cherries. A lot of them are hardy to zone 5 or 6, something a lot more warmer than what we see here in Wisconsin. So thought I'd give pink flare a try. It gets, you can see here, the light pink flowers, and generally it likes to flower about 2 weeks later than most Sargent cherry trees do, so that it avoids the late frost we tend to get here in May. So this one will be nice because hopefully it'll flower later in the season. I would say mid to maybe even late May instead of earlier in May when the frost can still nip it. And then the fall color on it is kind of a mix between burgundy, purple, orange, and yellow. So it's really pretty in the fall as well. I will be taking one of these home because they're also black walnut tolerant. So it's always a bonus for this area on the drift list where we tend to have a lot of walnut trees hanging around. The mature height, because it's an ornamental, is still only going to top out around about 20 to 25 feet. It's a little bit more narrow than it is tall, so it'll probably max out around 15 feet or so for width at maturity. So I don't actually honestly know if it does get any berries. The supplier's website doesn't list anything, but I would find it hard to believe that it didn't get any berries. So that's something that I will have to research, and if you are curious about that, you can ask me in the spring once we're open, and hopefully I'll have a good answer for you. And our very last new woody plant for 2024 is raspberry called Killarney. It is bred in Canada, but we are getting it from our supplier here in Wisconsin, from McKay Nursery. They grow them here in Wisconsin and are very hardy for us here in the Midwest. It's been available for a few years. I just never have gotten them in the past because I figured we had enough different raspberry varieties already until I tasted them. I have a couple of friends who have a raspberry patch and they've purchased these bare root from online suppliers. And when I tasted these, I decided we also needed to sell them because I thought they were the best tasting raspberries I had tasted. And I eat raspberries like they're going out of style. So my opinion means a lot to me. That's what I'm saying. So we'll have a lot of these Killarneys coming in this year along with the other varieties that we have had in the past. So not to worry, I didn't replace all the raspberries with this particular variety. The canes will be about 4 to 5 feet tall, 2 to 3 feet wide at maturity. So treat them as you would any other raspberry variety. Full sun also for best fruiting and flowering. All right, so that concludes our presentation for the new woody plants coming in for the 2024 season. If you do have questions, you can feel free to email us at knagreenhouse@gmail.com. If you would like to speak to me via email, make sure you put "Attention Jessica" in the subject line so that I make sure that I check it. We do have multiple people checking that email every day, so it gets kind of crazy, especially in spring. If you would prefer to call, you can either call the Verona store, where I'm working 3 or 4 days a week this year. It'll be 608-833-5244, or you can call the Fitchburg location if you want to talk to me there. I'm usually there at least once, if not twice a week, at 608-271-3230. I hope you enjoyed it, and we're looking forward to spring.